They'll say it's luck, that you just have something they don't. But they won't see the nights you fought through doubt, the mornings you showed up with nothing but a quiet fire inside. What they call confidence is actually something deeper, trained inner power. That kind of strength doesn't come from the outside. It's built in silence, through discipline, focus, and the refusal to quit. Stoicism teaches us that power begins within, not in changing the world, but in mastering our response to it. And if that resonates with you, if this feels like something you've been needing to hear, do me one simple favor. Hit that subscribe button. Let's train the mind. Let's build the power. Let's go. Do you know why most people never find peace, let alone power? Because they've never taken ownership of their thoughts. They've surrendered them to noise, to opinion, to history. Their mind is a museum of other people's voices, and they wonder why they feel like a stranger inside their own skin. But not you. You're beginning to understand that everything begins inside. That reality doesn't shape you. You shape it from the inside out. Inner power isn't something you chase. It's something you become. It's not a destination. It's a rhythm, a mental frequency. You tune yourself to it through repetition, discipline, and clarity. You sculpt it, moment by moment, like a craftsman refining a masterpiece no one else sees. And it starts with one simple truth. Your mind is not your enemy, but it is a wild animal. Untamed, it will run toward fear. Trained, it will carry you through fire. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But today, most people live on autopilot, never pausing to ask where their thoughts come from or who they've allowed to plant ideas in their head. They scroll, they react, they absorb, and they wonder why they feel anxious and lost. But a trained mind doesn't absorb everything. It selects, it filters, it protects its peace like a castle protects its king. When you train your mind, you stop living life as a reaction. You start living it as a design. Inner power isn't about pretending to be fearless. It's about recognizing your fear and choosing to move anyway. As Carl Jung put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You begin to see that most of your limitations were inherited, not chosen. And once you realize that, you can let them go. Not easily, not instantly, but deliberately. Like pulling weeds from a garden, you remove the thoughts that no longer serve the future you're building. This is why discipline matters, not just in action, but in thought. Every time you bring your mind back from distraction, from worry, from self-doubt, you're laying another brick in the foundation of your inner fortress. Power isn't built in bursts. It's built in repetition. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit, and your habits begin with your mind. How you talk to yourself, what you allow to stay, what you choose to dismiss. That inner dialogue becomes your outer life. Inner power grows in silence. In the early mornings when you sit with your own thoughts and decide, "I will not be run by yesterday." In those small moments when you say no to what's easy and yes to what's right. When you stop letting the world tell you who you are and start telling the world who you're becoming. And no, it's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's real, it's solid. Plato once wrote, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." That's what this is. Not a sprint to perfection, but a slow, intentional return to who you were always meant to be. You begin by waking up before the world has a chance to write on you, before the scroll, before the noise, before the stories return. You meet yourself in stillness, not just to hear, but to decide. What kind of life are you building? What version of you walks into today? This is not about fake positivity or wishful thinking. It's about precision, vision, alignment. You don't beg the world to treat you differently. You become someone the world cannot ignore. And that begins with identity. Because if your mind still sees yourself as the one who waits, the one who doubts, the one who shrinks back when things get hard, then no matter how much you want to change, you'll keep returning to what feels familiar. Change doesn't happen by chance. It begins with choosing a new internal image and choosing it so often that it starts to feel like home. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That cuts deep, because we all say we want growth, success, freedom. But what do we practice? What do we tolerate in ourselves day after day? You're not sculpted by intentions. You're shaped by what you consistently repeat. When you wake up and meet yourself in that early silence, you're not just preparing for the day. You're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. Each morning becomes an act of creation, not reaction. You're not waiting to feel motivated. You're generating momentum through choice. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But that knowing doesn't come from thinking alone. It comes from noticing your patterns, your impulses, your self-talk, and then with clarity rewriting them. It means choosing your thoughts the way an artist chooses color, not based on habit, but based on intention. You start asking, does this belief build me or bury me? And that single question changes everything. You begin to edit your inputs. You get intentional about what voices you allow in, because not every opinion deserves your attention. Most of what people call advice is just their fear disguised as logic, and if you let that in, it becomes your ceiling. But a trained mind learns to filter. It protects its mental space like sacred ground. It replaces mental clutter with focus, with clarity, with silence. Not the absence of thought, but the presence of purpose. And that purpose begins to shape your choices. You stop waiting for the perfect plan. You move with what you have. You act, not out of pressure, but from power. You learn that your real strength doesn't come from the outside. It grows every time you choose alignment over approval. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." But in a distracted world, power starts with managing your attention, with choosing not to scatter your energy, but to direct it, to focus on building something real, something solid. And as you do, something shifts. The anxiety lessens, the fog clears. Not because life gets easier, but because you've anchored yourself in a deeper place. You no longer need the world to validate your path. You've committed to it. That's when the identity you've been practicing starts to feel like truth. You don't have to force belief anymore. It starts to live in you, quietly, firmly. And when life tests you, and it will, you'll stand. Not because of motivation, but because you've trained your mind to honor your decisions, not your moods. Do you see yourself as a builder or a survivor? As someone who reacts or someone who decides? Most people never ask. They don't stop long enough to notice the story they're living. They chase different results but keep the same identity, wondering why nothing ever changes. They want transformation, but they're still using the old blueprint. But you're stepping into authorship. You're not waiting for life to hand you a new script. You're rewriting it, line by line. You're editing the code that runs silently in the background. Your beliefs, your patterns, your self-image. And that changes everything. You write in clarity. You delete self-pity. You format for strength. Every thought, every belief, every habit becomes a conscious choice. You're not living by default anymore. You're living by design. And this mental architecture you're building, it's not fragile, it's reinforced. It doesn't just stand in calm, it stands in chaos, because the storm will come. That's a promise. People will doubt you. Some will leave, others will laugh. Your own thoughts will whisper old stories, ones that sound familiar and comfortable, but that keep you small. And life will disguise distractions as golden opportunities. But a trained mind sees through the illusion. It doesn't chase noise. It moves with purpose. It does not collapse under pressure. It sharpens. It adapts. It endures. It evolves. Socrates once said, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." And that's what you're doing. Not reacting to the world, but building your place in it. Every challenge you face becomes another layer in your foundation. You stop fearing failure because you understand it's part of the blueprint. You know it's feedback, not defeat. You stop flinching when things don't go your way, because you're no longer here to be entertained. You're here to create. Carl Jung reminded us, what you resist persists. And so you stop resisting the work. You stop dodging the discomfort. You lean into it, knowing that real transformation isn't loud. It's slow, it's daily, it's often invisible. But it's always working, reshaping you from the inside out. And when the storm hits, and it will, you won't crumble. You won't question who you are. You'll respond like a builder, calm, focused, ready. Because your identity no longer depends on results. It's rooted in resilience. Let me ask you, what do you feed your mind when no one's watching? Is it silence or stimulation? Depth or distraction? Do you fill it with comparison, complaint, and excuses? Or do you saturate it with vision, with intention, with that quiet, steady knowing that you're not just getting through life, you're being shaped for something greater? Your mind is fertile ground. It doesn't care if you're planting weeds or roses, it will grow whatever you give it. Every thought is a seed. And emotion? Emotion is the water. Some people water their worries daily and then act surprised when anxiety blooms. Others water their purpose, their clarity, their conviction, and you can feel the difference in them even before they say a word. Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." That level of mental discipline isn't loud or flashy, but it changes everything. It means you stop being a passive receiver and start becoming a conscious creator. You don't let just any thought take root. You choose what you cultivate. Because you're always planting. Every conversation, every piece of content, every passing moment of self-talk is shaping you. Whether you mean to or not, you're rehearsing who you'll become. That's why inner power doesn't just come from action. It comes from what you allow to grow in the first place. The mind is always listening to your words, to your tone, to your patterns. And the more you repeat something, even quietly, the more your mind assumes it must be true. That's how beliefs form. Not from what's real, but from what's repeated. That's why people can carry around lies about themselves for years and call it truth. But when you catch that, when you take that moment to ask, does this serve the person I'm becoming? That's when the shift begins. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And most people live that way, reacting to life, repeating inherited stories, calling it destiny. But once you wake up to it, once you realize you're the one planting the seeds, you get to reclaim authorship. You no longer wait to see what life gives you. You decide what you're going to grow. That choice, done consistently, becomes a lifestyle. You stop flooding your mind with junk and start feeding it fuel. You start replacing doubt with direction, worry with work, fear with focus. You become careful with what you consume, not just in food, but in thought. And that alone separates you from most people, because power doesn't start with what you do, it starts with what you allow. It's built in silence, in intention, in choosing thoughts that build something instead of break something. And that choice, repeated enough, becomes who you are, not by accident, but by design. So ask yourself this: are you sowing power or passivity? Are you programming your mind for leadership or for longing? Every day, whether you're aware of it or not, you're writing code into your own system, thought by thought, action by action. And it doesn't matter how badly you want change if your habits are still loyal to the version of you who fears it. The gap between who you are and who you could be isn't closed by one big leap. It's built like a bridge, quietly, steadily, with small, consistent bricks. It's not the bold declarations that shape you. It's the tiny, invisible acts, the moment you pause before reacting, the decision to stay focused when your phone, your comfort or your past calls your name, the silent choice to show up when no one's watching and no one's applauding. Inner power isn't loud. It doesn't shout for attention. It sharpens itself in the background, that strength you admire in others. It wasn't gifted, it was cultivated, in stillness, in structure, in solitude. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." And that conquest doesn't happen on a stage. It happens in the shadows, before dawn, when the world is asleep and your mind is wide open. There's something sacred about those early hours. It's where the drift stops and decision begins. When you rise and whisper to yourself, "This mind is mine. I am not here to float. I am here to build." That's when it starts to shift. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you stop giving your power away to chaos, to reaction, to every thought that shows up uninvited. Carl Jung reminded us, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." You begin to awaken to the fact that power isn't something out there to chase. It's something inside you waiting to be claimed, waiting to be trained. And that training doesn't start with intensity. It starts with consistency, with choices repeated long enough to become identity. Eventually, you stop relying on hype. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop negotiating with weakness. You know what you're here for. You begin to treat your thoughts like architects treat blueprints, precise, intentional, designed to build something that lasts. And decision, true decision, means nothing is left behind. No escape routes, no backup plans, no second lives waiting in the shadows just in case this one gets uncomfortable. It's a line in the sand, a silent vow that says, "I don't go back." Because every time you keep a door cracked to your old habits, your old identity will find its way in. Real decision is a kind of death, a quiet one. It's the death of who you were, of who you kept pretending to be because it felt safe, familiar, easy. But that version of you can't walk where you're going. And deep down, you already know that. So who needs to die? The one who procrastinates. Who waits for the stars to align before moving? The one who folds the moment pressure shows up? Or maybe it's the one who plays small, who hides behind excuses, who calls fear logic and avoidance patience. They've had their time, and now they have to go, not in shame, but with honesty. With the awareness that they were part of your survival, but they can't be part of your transformation. They were built for comfort, not for purpose. Plato said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." But you can't hold real power while clinging to patterns that were designed to protect you from discomfort. Power requires presence. It demands alignment. It only flows when you let go of the thoughts and behaviors that fracture your focus. That old version of you, the one who needed permission, the one who settled for potential instead of progress, needs to be buried beneath new thoughts. Thoughts that demand more, that refuse to negotiate, that speak in the language of vision and discipline, not doubt and delay. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, and that pain is what most people run from, but not you." You're beginning to understand that the only way to grow into something stronger is to leave something behind, something that no longer fits. This isn't just about changing your mindset, it's about rewriting your identity, replacing emotional shortcuts with new standards, replacing fragile intentions with non-negotiable commands. You don't try anymore. You move, you act, you choose again and again, until the choice becomes who you are. And what comes after? Stillness, strength, simplicity. A trained mind doesn't swirl with endless noise or second-guess every step. It moves with quiet confidence. It doesn't get caught in emotional loops or wait for the perfect conditions. It acts, and through action, it becomes ready. That's the difference most people never see. They wait for clarity to give them permission, but those who build inner power know the secret. Clarity follows movement, it doesn't lead it. This is the dividing line between those who dabble and those who dominate. Dabblers seek energy from the outside. They scroll, compare, hope for motivation to strike like lightning. But dominators, they generate energy from the inside out. They don't need the room to be silent before they can focus. They create silence within themselves. They're not driven by mood. They're anchored in mission. Life doesn't respond to your intentions. It's not listening to what you hope will happen. It's watching what you allow. The world reflects back your standards, not your goals, not your dreams, your standards. What you tolerate, you reinforce. And what you reinforce, you eventually become. So raise your standards. Start with your mind. Refuse to entertain thoughts that shrink you. Refuse to rehearse limitations that belong to a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. Let go of language that keeps you in limbo. The subtle phrases like, "I'll try," or "maybe someday." They sound harmless, but they rot your potential from the inside. Replace them with language that builds. "I'm doing," "I'm building," "I'm becoming." Speak not as a struggler trying to survive, but as a builder crafting something meaningful. Think not like a skeptic looking for a reason to doubt, but like an architect studying every detail of a structure that's already underway. Move not in hesitation, but in quiet, calm decision. Because what you repeat, you become. That's not a metaphor. That's how your brain works. Every thought you echo creates a groove, a neural pathway. Repeat it often enough, and your mind accepts it as default. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. And the mind loves familiarity, even if it's toxic. That's why growth feels uncomfortable. You're not just changing behavior, you're teaching your brain a new language, one it hasn't yet learned to trust. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. That includes how you think, how you speak, how you carry yourself in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Because those moments are where inner power is shaped. And when that power becomes natural, when that calm becomes your baseline, everything changes. So echo power, not noise, not doubt, not the recycled fears passed down by those who never dared. Echo power in the way you think, in the way you walk, in the way you speak to yourself when no one's around to hear it. Let it guide your presence, even when you're silent, especially when you're silent. Because silence, when paired with clarity, becomes presence. And presence is power. See what others miss because they're too distracted to notice. Build what others are too afraid to attempt. Create what others only consume. Most people live as followers, not because they lack ambition, but because they haven't yet realized that reaction is a form of surrender. You don't have to live that way. You can step off the autopilot path. You can stop waiting for signs, for permission, for someone to notice your potential. The force you're looking for is already in you. It's just been buried under the noise. Inner power isn't found in fake confidence. Confidence can be performed. It can be borrowed, even faked. But clarity, that comes from deep alignment, from knowing exactly who you are and what you're building, even if no one claps for it yet. And that kind of clarity doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from commitment, not public commitment, private. The kind no one sees, the kind that doesn't need to be posted or shared, the kind that's forged in the dark when you write the vision down, when you make a silent promise to yourself that you refuse to break. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart." That's where it starts, in solitude, in honesty, in deciding that the life you feel deep down is possible, is your responsibility to create, even if the world doesn't believe in it yet. So reclaim it. Reclaim your mornings, before the scroll, before the demands, before the noise returns. Those first moments, they're yours. Protect them. Fill them with intention. Don't check into the world until you've checked in with yourself. That's where your edge is. Not in doing more, but in doing what matters, while others are still lost in distraction. Reclaim your attention. You don't owe every notification your focus. You don't need to absorb every opinion that crosses your screen. You are not meant to be available to everyone all the time. You are meant to be precise, to be rooted, to guard your energy like it's the fuel for your future, because it is. Reclaim your ability to focus longer than the average person can scroll. In a world addicted to novelty, your ability to stay locked in on one thing, one idea, one task, one goal, is your advantage. That's not just productivity, that's discipline, that's power, that's the armor you wear when life throws distractions dressed as opportunities. And when it gets hard, remember this. Resistance is a sign you're entering new territory. It's not a wall, it's a threshold. The tension you feel isn't a stop sign, it's growth announcing itself. Most people turn back the moment it gets uncomfortable, but discomfort is where the old version of you ends and the new one begins. That tightness in your chest, that urge to quit, that's the sound of your limits being stretched. Lean into it. Not with force, but with focus. Let the pressure do its work. Let the friction reveal where you're still holding back. Let the failures show you what still needs refinement. Setbacks don't mean you're doing it wrong. They mean you're doing something real. A trained mind doesn't just survive the hard moments. It studies them. It extracts value from them. Because when you've trained your mind to lead, to endure, to observe instead of panic, nothing gets wasted, not even pain. That is power, not the noisy kind that needs to prove itself, not the kind that shouts for attention or flexes for validation. Real power is quiet. It's presence. It's the kind of energy that walks into a room and shifts it without saying a word. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And the most powerful people, they don't move loudly, they move with purpose. They don't seek permission, they act from clarity. They don't need applause to feel aligned. Their conviction is internal, rooted, unshakable. They don't react to the world, they shape it, moment by moment, with the way they think, the way they speak, the way they carry themselves when no one's clapping. That's what you're building, not overnight, not all at once, but piece by piece, intention by intention, thought by thought. It's not an accident, and it's not luck, it's design. Carl Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." You are not just waking up to your potential, you're stepping into it, and every time it hurts, every time it tests you, it's carving out more space for strength to live inside you. This isn't just self-improvement, it's self-construction. And you're not building someone better just to be admired. You're building someone stronger, clearer, more whole, so you can carry the weight of your own purpose without breaking. That's the path, and you're on it now. So design with purpose, not just for what you want to achieve, but for who you want to become in the process. Build your self-talk like a fortress, solid, intentional, protective. Stack your habits like bricks, not rushed, not random, but one by one, locked in with consistency. Sculpt your emotions into fuel instead of letting them burn you out. Use what you feel to push, to focus, to rise. Program your attention like a weapon, not for aggression, but for precision. Aim it where it matters and never let it scatter across the noise. And above all, never, never negotiate with weakness. Don't reason with the part of you that wants to delay, to settle, to go numb. That voice has had enough time. It's quiet now. You are not here to survive. You are not here to drift from day to day hoping for meaning to appear. You are here to command, to build something that outlives fear, to serve a vision that pulls something greater out of you, to elevate, not just your life, but the standard by which you live it. Train your mind, because that's where the shift begins, not in the world, in you. And when your mind is powerful, truly aligned with clarity, discipline, and direction, everything begins to shift. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way opportunities start showing up, not because you force them, but because you became the kind of person they're drawn to. Not just your results change, reality changes. Thank you for spending this time here. Your presence means more than you know. If this spoke to something in you, you'll find even more in the next video on your screen. It's all connected. Every step matters. Until next time, stay grounded, stay focused, and keep building what only you were meant to build. We'll be right here when you're ready for the next step.